All right, there we go. Good morning. What a wonderful crowd. And welcome to the third annual National Convening of Local Progress. All right. Local Progress, for those who knew to clap, is our national network of elected officials from cities and counties and localities across the country committed to fighting income inequality, building sustainable and livable cities, establishing good government that effectively serves the public interest, and advancing equal justice under the law. I'm Brad Lander, a member of the New York City Council and a board member of Local Progress. The privilege of welcoming you to this chamber actually belongs to its marvelous presiding officer, who will be with us in just a minute and who I'll have the opportunity to introduce. But on behalf of the Board of Local Progress, I just want to say a word of welcome to our convening. Let me first welcome and introduce the Board of Local Progress. So will you guys stand up and introduce yourselves? Our Board Chair Nick Licata from Seattle, John Avalos from San Francisco, Wilson Good from Philadelphia, David Alvarez from San Diego, Megan Sadi-Wells from Culver City, California, and Robin Kniech from Denver, and Gail McLaughlin from Richmond, California. So thank you guys all for being here. We've come together at a critical moment. Over the last several days, from Ferguson, Missouri, to Cleveland, Ohio, to New York City, and in solidarity all across the country, people are on the march, and many of us have joined them in protest of the deaths of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, and Akai Gurley, demanding justice from a system where it is sadly so elusive. And many of us also joined yesterday in a national day of actions, of strikes and worker actions with fast food workers who have been organizing and standing up to demand decent pay, dignity, fair schedules, and the right to join a union. And one thing we noted yesterday is that since they began their actions 2 years ago, 7 million people across the country have been covered by increases in minimum wages in states and cities, in large part supported and sponsored by people in this very chamber at this moment. Last night at our welcome reception, scholar and activist John Powell asked us, how do we turn this moment of anger and passion and a real insistence on advance in racial injustice, how do we turn this moment into a movement? And it reminded me of Dr. King's quote, "We are confronted by the fierce urgency of now. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action." Unfortunately, as we know, the possibility of vigorous and positive action in pursuit of economic and social and racial justice is so limited in Congress and in too many state legislatures, where a majority don't share our nonpartisan goals of fighting inequality and demanding equal justice. And that's why what we're gathering to do here over the next 2 days as Local Progress is so deeply important. With local legislators who have helped to increase the minimum wage, establish living wages, ensure paid sick days, require fair scheduling, and more. And on policing and criminal justice, winning real reforms in Cincinnati and Seattle and here, steps forward around the country. And we'll talk about more about issues and challenges of affordable housing, climate change and resiliency, employment discrimination, and many, many more issues that you can see in your schedule. Now, part of what change requires is courageous leadership, strong and effective in governing, but also deeply in partnership with grassroots community and labor organizations. And that is why I'm so honored to have the privilege to introduce our first co-host. And she will speak for a bit and then introduce the second co-host. Melissa Mark Viverito is the Speaker of the New York City Council and a true champion for social justice, for inclusion, for grassroots economic empowerment, for participatory government, and for neighborhoods. She is the first Puerto Rican and Latina to hold a citywide elected position in New York City. She represents the 8th District in the Council, which includes El Barrio and the South Bronx. Speaker Mark Viverito was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. She worked for over a decade prior to coming into elected office in local activism, nonprofit leadership, and labor before being elected to this city council for the first time in 2005. In 2009, after she was elected to a second term, she served as chair of the Committee on Parks and Recreation, was founding co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, and a member and leader with the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus. In 2011, she was one of 4 city council members to pioneer the first ever participatory budgeting process in New York City, which now, under her speakership, has grown to 24 members. It'll distribute more than $25 million this year, by far the biggest participatory budgeting in North America. That's worth clapping for, too. She became Speaker a year ago in a hard-fought campaign in which she assembled a broad and diverse coalition and was ultimately elected unanimously by the 51 members of this body to lead us. And already in her 11 months as Speaker has established a real tremendous track record on a range of issues. I want to point especially to her leadership on immigration reform, another issue that we've got a panel on today. Thanks to her leadership there, New York City recently passed the strongest laws in the country, limiting the ability of the U.S. Department of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement from detaining and ultimately deporting people who had been arrested for nonviolent crimes, in many cases, being found not guilty of anything at all, and in many cases of very low-level offenses, but who previously were facing detention and deportation. And as a result, thousands of immigrants in New York City who have committed either no crime or a simple low-level infraction, who would have been deported will not be deported from New York City this year and in the years to come. Thanks also to that leadership, in partnership with some others in this room and in this chamber, New York City is on the front lines of providing support for unaccompanied minors fleeing violence from Central America. And similarly, thanks to her leadership in partnership with others, including the mayor, New York City in January will have the new New York City Municipal ID card up and running. An idea that I'll mention I first learned of at the first Local Progress National Convening 2 years ago from folks in Los Angeles who were busy starting to work on it there. And that's just in 11 months and just on one issue. So you can see what we got in this leadership. That is exactly the kind of vigorous and positive action that Dr. King's idea of the fierce urgency of now demands. And so I'm grateful to serve in this body under her leadership, and really grateful that she's made it possible for us to be here in this chamber to talk together in places like this where we've got the opportunity to make enormous progress, but also in cities across the country, large and small, blue and red and purple states, where people are thinking, how do we take the next steps together, whatever they look like in the place that we are? And then what do we do to add that up together to make a bigger difference both in our own places and then in our states and our countries as well. So I'm grateful, and I want to shout out Christine McLaughlin for helping do the work to make sure the chambers were ready today, as well as Rachel Goodman on my staff and the Center for Popular Democracy and Local Progress team. Members of Local Progress, please join me in welcoming our co-host, the Speaker of the Council of New York City, and my good friend, Melissa Mark Viverito.
Well, thank you, Brad, for your friendship and your leadership. And I think he said everything. I may not even have to stand up here. It's great to see our colleague, Corey Johnson, and I'm sure other council members will come. I just have to say, Brad touched on it a little bit. It's been a really rough week. I think it's been a really, really rough week. Past couple of weeks have been extremely rough, and I think it's a moment, I think, where we have to do some serious reflection about what our purpose is. And as elected officials, even more so. And as public policymakers, there's a lot of allies in the room as well. But when we heard, obviously, between the decision in Michael Brown and now with Eric Gardner and what we've seen happen in Cleveland with Tamir Rice and then Akai Gurley, it's just been an extremely difficult moment. And I was saying that, in hearing the decision here in New York, there was really, I had hope that we were going to get an indictment. And when we did, and I took it much harder than I thought. And so it was just a moment where, again, as I said, we have to really reflect on what our purpose is and look at how do we really try to uproot the inequities that exist, and that we create and build a society, a community, a world that is going to put out justice that is equal for all. And it seems to be elusive for too many. And that is a reality. And so when we come together in moments like this, where I welcome my colleagues in government that are in governing in different legislative bodies across this nation, we reflect on the practices that are happening, that are creating equality in other parts of our nation, and figuring out how can we continue that momentum and achieve really the change that we want to achieve. So I want to congratulate those of you that are here for the work that you've engaged in. And I know Local Progress is really on that path, so I really want to thank you for that. So with that, we'll say good morning. Buenos dias, as I like to say. And we have events here in this chamber. This is the people's house. We always open the doors and really welcome everybody. And we're proud to be hosting this amazing crowd of progressive leaders and allies in government. You're all great thinkers and innovators, so thank you for the work that you do. And we're here, obviously, because we do share a guiding set of principles that we believe in equality of access and opportunity, no matter who you are and where you live, and that we believe in a government that is accountable to the people it represents. And we believe that government should be inclusive of this country's dynamic diversity. And this city council, out of the 51 members, 27 are people of color. So it reflects the beautiful diversity of this city as well, and I think that's really the direction we should be heading in. On the gender side, we don't. Only 15 of 51 are women. That's a problem. We're working on that. We believe that as a nation, and that in a nation, that we can all move forward together, and that's what we all work towards. We see systemic problems, obviously, problems of social and economic justice, of widespread inequality, and we refuse to stand by silent. We're on the ground, living and experiencing some of today's greatest challenges, as the past couple of weeks have shown us, whether it's the need for housing, fair wages, or immigration reform. Our unique perspectives and experiences are crucial as we mobilize and work together to set our city's progressive agenda to deal with these issues in a meaningful way. And obviously, Brad has laid out some of the work we've done here in New York City. We've made great strides. Obviously, we have a progressive mayor that believes in that, and he just walked in through the door. That he believes, making great strides to build a city that we can all be proud of and proud to call home. And looking back on all of our accomplishments this year, that's a testament to the strength of the progressive movement in New York City, a progressive movement that we want to see march on throughout this nation. We desperately, desperately need that. So thanks to the tireless advocacy and organizing of many of the groups here today, a forward-thinking council, and a supportive mayor, we all know about the legislation that we've passed here at the beginning of the year. It was the first legislation that we passed under my leadership, is the expanded paid sick leave law. So we're very, very excited about that. And we're interested in seeing that our laws are living up to our values and providing our workers with the protection, respect, and dignity they deserve. Now, we're also pushing, and again, this has been successful, I think, in other areas, and we are a little behind on this one, in terms of pushing to raise the state minimum wage to reflect the reality of life in our city. Our current statewide minimum wage is $8 an hour, higher than ever before, but obviously we can do much, much better than that, and we have to do much better than that. So we're really facing that challenge head on. It is one of our priorities on our state legislative agenda, and we are doing that in partnership with our partners in the labor movement. And we're going to continue to advocate for a fair minimum wage that reflects the reality of our economy, that it makes sense for workers, that it makes sense for the middle class, and it makes sense for us. And the mobilizing that's been happening nationally of the fast food workers is incredibly inspiring in that, and really demanding for the $15, but also hopefully leading to better working conditions for those workers as well. At the core of our work is a drive toward greater inclusivity, the belief people from all backgrounds, communities, and walks of life should have a voice in our and a seat at the table of government. And this is crucial because they are precisely whom our government and our policies are meant to serve. This year, the New York City Council, as Brad had said, expanded participatory budgeting to 24 or 25 districts. It keeps growing. We keep getting interest from council members, which is great. And so it's the largest, obviously, participatory budgeting process in this nation. At minimum, giving out $1 million per district. I give out $2 million in my district that I allow my constituents to decide how to spend. So hopefully we could get even up to $50 million if every council member were to do that. And over the course of the upcoming year, residents of these 22 districts and 24 districts, I think it is, will work with their council members to identify neighborhood concerns and craft proposals to address them. So it's very exciting, and then vote on them. And the only identification requirement in this process, we actually open this process up. I think that now we're lowering it to 16 years of age, so young people can participate. It's a really encouraging civic involvement, which is critically important. That's what we want to do as well. And anyone, whether you're a felon, someone who's recently been brought home, whether you're undocumented, can participate in this process. It's giving a voice to everyone, particularly those that have been voiceless in government. That's critically something we're really proud of. And we also voted on the municipal ID program that the mayor might talk about as well. This municipal ID program open to everyone. People can self-identify in terms of your gender on the card. Those that are documented, not documented, can have access to the card. This is a card for every New Yorker. And again, that vision that we have, that everyone's voice and everyone is valid and is validated through the government is also reflected in this municipal ID program. And it's going to increase access to public and city services. So we're really excited about that one. And documented New Yorkers are also Americans, right, in this country. But you wouldn't know it by the federal government's consistent failure to enact comprehensive immigration reform. And President Obama's executive order is a strong start. Obviously, we want to do much more than that. And so New York City, again, has stepped up to the plate, and Brad outlined some of the work that we've done very proudly here in the City Council. The mayor can speak to the work he's been doing as well in terms of convening mayors from across this nation. He'll be doing that this weekend. We're funding free legal representation to unaccompanied minors. We have about 1,400 unaccompanied minors in New York City, about 3,000, 3,500 in New York State. But we've been able to partner with philanthropy. We put in $1 million. Philanthropy raised about $1 million too. We're providing every child with legal representation for free, obviously. That was critically important. It's a value we uphold. So we were very happy to do that. And then the bill that Brad talked about, which we will not be honoring any detainers here in New York City. And that's really exciting as well. So we're not going to stop there. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do. I was actually in D.C. earlier this week to talk to some individuals at the White House about the executive order and how we're going to roll that out moving forward. There's a lot of work that has to be done in that case, and that people do not get abused in that process as well. There are going to be those that want to take advantage economically of individuals. But it all starts with us standing up together for social and economic justice, and it starts with leaders in this room who are on the ground every day. So I really want to thank you for your leadership and momentum in keeping this movement, this progressive movement, alive and as a force to be reckoned with. We need to keep building on that. The next 2 years are critically important. And I really do look forward to accomplishing that together. And I'll leave it there, but I do have the honor of introducing our mayor, Bill de Blasio, who really needs little introduction, but I want to say it's been incredibly wonderful to work with him as an ally. The City Council is proud to stand with him on the values that he believes in, which is a progressive vision that is inclusive, as we talked about, something that we uphold as well. And some of the issues that we've worked on, so many. The immigration work that we had to do, it had to be in partnership with our mayor. His vision of providing universal pre-K for every child is something that we put as a priority as a city council, and we lobbied in Albany to make sure that that money came to us. And when you talk about equalizing the playing field, you know, I really don't, universal pre-K is really one of those things that will do that. We know the achievement gap is too real for Black and brown children in our society that are unfortunately steps behind. And universal pre-K will help reduce the achievement gap. And that is where it all starts, with the education of our children and building that future. So it's been great having him as an ally in our efforts to fight inequality and build a more progressive city. And with that, I'd like to introduce the mayor of the city of New York, Bill de Blasio.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to New York City. Welcome to our City Hall. As we say in New York City, mi casa es su casa. We're glad that you are having this gathering here where so much of this exciting and extraordinary work is happening. And I want to talk for a few minutes about what we're doing, but much more importantly, I just want to talk to you as colleagues and people who believe in a lot of the same things that we're working on here. And I want to spend a couple of moments thanking you and encouraging you in the work you do. But first, giving credit where credit is due. It is a very good idea, if you want to make progressive social change, to elect a progressive mayor. But a progressive mayor only gets you so far. You need a progressive city council if you really want to make fundamental and lasting change. And I have to tell you, the partnership that I've experienced with Melissa Mark Viverito has been extraordinary. It's been everything I could ask for in terms of a sense of commitment, a sense of shared vision, and a relentlessness. One thing I deeply appreciate about Melissa, and you'll see this in her work, she is not patient when it comes to the problems we face in our society. She feels urgency. And to have a partner in government who matches our urgency and pushes us, in fact, to keep focused and go farther has been one of the reasons we've achieved what we've achieved. It's not just that with her leadership, this city council has moved so many important pieces of legislation and moved so many important acts in tandem with the administration. It's that Melissa's been a voice of conscience and a real clarion call to progressives in this city. And I want to just thank her for that leadership. It's been indispensable to the changes that we've made in this city. Thank you, Melissa. And I want to thank Brad Lander. I know Brad's been deeply involved with this organization. You know, there is nothing more personal than who takes over the city council district you represent. And Brad has done a great, great job as a council member for the district that is still my home, even though I'd like to say I have been temporarily relocated to government housing in another facility. My home and my heart are still in Brooklyn, and Brad is doing a great job as a representative of that district, but he's also been a great progressive leader on a host of issues and someone who understands the power of organizing progressives both locally and nationally. Let's thank Brad for all he is doing. Want to thank a colleague who's been also a great progressive voice in the City Council, and we've partnered on many, many important pieces of legislation and other actions. Corey Johnson of Manhattan, thank you. I cannot tell a lie. I do not know Nick Licata. I know he's a council member from Seattle. I know he is the chair of Local Progress, and I thank him for that, but I can tell you that just judging from what Seattle's achieved, I already like Nick Licata. And I like Nick Licata's name. I just have to say that, Nick. A little solidarity moment here, calling out the ancestors. Want to thank all of you and welcome all of you and just thank you for the work you do. We all reference each other. We all build upon each other's work. Seattle, I'm going to tip my cap, and I hope Seattle, I've said this to Mayor Murray as well, I hope you appreciate that we bow before you here in the largest city in the country, and we look with great respect at what you've achieved. But I think it's true with so many cities. What we have been able to do here has largely been informed and energized by actions taken in other cities. And I hope we're doing that and helping some of that to occur elsewhere as well. There's an incredible sort of implicit collegiality and an implicit movement that has been created among progressives all over the country through actions at the local level. I think we need to organize it more deeply. I know I'm preaching to the converted on that front, but it's happening. It's happening every day implicitly. It's having huge impact, and so many people in this room are a part of that. I want to thank you. I also want to thank colleagues that we've turned to here in this city as allies who have helped us to organize on a host of issues. Particularly want to thank Andrew Friedman, the Executive Director of the Center for Popular Democracy, for all the work he's done on this convening. And you'll be hearing from a lot of folks who are part of the work we do here. I want to single out one of the panelists you'll be hearing from later this morning, my counsel, Maya Wiley, who is lurking in the back, who will tell you a lot about what we are working on. But let me just say something very brief, but I think to the point about this work. The reality for progressives, I've felt this throughout my entire life, is implicitly history's on our side. The people are on our side. Sometimes the only problem is we have trouble seeing it. And that's not an indictment of us. That's more acknowledgement of the challenges we face in the trenches, because there's a whole host of messages that we receive every single day telling us that what we see before our eyes can't be possible. And I've often felt that that's not surprising. When you fight against the status quo, it is not surprising the status quo will tell you you're crazy. They'll tell you what you're trying to do is impossible. They'll tell you what you're trying to do won't work. It's natural. It wouldn't be the status quo if it didn't have that combined weight to continually undermine and belittle the efforts you make. But that core point I begin with, history's on our side, the people are on our side, I think is unquestionable. I think it's been proven time and time again. There are so many examples in this nation's history when a good progressive idea crystallized, how it came to the fore and gained momentum and won the day, often in very short order. And we have to remember that. Sometimes it is a burden. I don't mean this to be in any way maudlin about the reality, but it is a burden and a challenge to fight for social change. Sometimes it wears you down a little. But what we're trying to do is not only right, it's what the people would ask of us. And in fact, sometimes we don't experience as much support as we'd like, not because the people don't agree, not because they don't need this change, because they've heard those voices telling them it can't happen, and they've seen too many things that didn't work, and they've had too many experiences that gave them the right to be cynical. So we face a double burden. We have to overcome sometimes some of our own hesitancy and our own sense of being a little tired from these fights. We also have to overcome the valid cynicism that people have felt when too many injustices occurred. I believe, notwithstanding those facts, that every time we succeed, it builds strength for each other. Every time one city acts, it builds momentum for another city. Every time a number of cities act, it builds momentum for our nation. And when you think about it, we wish, naturally, that we could see the kind of progressive movement, the kind of progressive progress from our nation's capital that from time to time in our history we have seen. I think a lot of us grew up with the notion of a just and energetic federal government leading the way on economic justice, on civil rights, and we should continue to aspire to that. That is what our federal government should be, and we, I think, are part of how it will become that again. I know at the state level, so many of us have had our challenges. And that's true of all urban areas, trying to get their state governments to be supportive and to move in a more progressive direction. But when you think about what democracy can and should be, there's something quite honest and just about change coming from the grassroots and working its way up. In a sense, we would love it if our national government led the way, but it's not surprising that when it doesn't, it calls upon us to do more at the grassroots, to find more partnership, to reach farther out across our states, our metropolitan areas, deepen those alliances. Because real change, actually lasting change, comes from the grassroots by definition. doesn't come from a single piece of legislation or a budget process. Those things are important, but real, sustained, lasting change comes from the grassroots. It comes from a change in the way people think and what they demand. I talked about in these last days here in this city the changes we're making in the relationship between police and community. And I've said to people, even with some of the pain they felt in recent days, I said, look at this host of changes. Just take stop and frisk as such an obvious example. In 2011, just 3 years ago, 700,000 stops. 90% of those stopped innocent in every way, shape, or form. Overwhelmingly young men of color. This year we will have under 50,000 stops, and there are going to be much more stops of actual criminals. How's that? Now, the reason I give you that example is to say I'm proud of what policies I've brought to bear. I'm proud of the work that the City Council has done with us, but it changed well before I was elected. It changed because the people demanded it, because there was a crystallization of a movement in this city pushing for change. So change began. We took it to the next level. We're deepening it in so many ways. But the change was at the people. The change was at the grassroots. And our job, in a sense, is to always not just be elected officials, but to be organizers. Again, I know I'm preaching to the converted. But in a funny way, it gets us back to our origins, if you will. You know, when the Republic was formed, they did not have a notion of a professional elected official or a professional politician. They certainly did not have consultants and campaign managers and all. It was the citizen soldier and the citizen public servant and the farmer who went to go serve in the Congress for a while. Well, think about it from our perspective. So many people here, because you serve in local office, you're closest to the ground. Vast majority of us who have served in local office did something else before or do something else at the same time to support our families. We have that connection, or maybe a little closer to the original idea, but think about the whole concept. Change was always supposed to come from the grassroots, and we were supposed to be shepherds at the most local level, and you add up enough local actions and that becomes national action. And we almost have to retrain ourselves, in my opinion, in that reality, given the politics of Washington that we've experienced in recent years. I actually think it's also an antidote to some of the defeatism that one can feel looking at Washington. Because interestingly, as Washington has gotten slower and slower and more paralyzed and more divided, cities are galloping ahead in terms of progressive social change. Again, look what's happened in so many cities on minimum wage and living wage. Look what's happened on paid sick leave. Look how paid sick leave started as something that seemed hard to reach and started just moving from city to city rapidly. What we're doing on municipal IDs, which Melissa referenced, well, that's because a couple of cities boldly decided to try something that had never been tried before. In that same spirit that I deeply honor from the New Deal, not just that sense that we had to change things fundamentally and answer people's pain and respond to their reality, but we had to experiment. What's more progressive than experimentation, than a willingness to try that which has not been tried again in light of changing circumstances? So the laboratories for change are in each of your cities right now. And the beauty of it is we can act together in a way that was never possible before. There's much less that disconnects or divides us as localities than in the past. Our ability to communicate, our ability to coordinate is greater by definition than ever before because of technology and so many other factors. We can create this new reality. And the speed with which it is done is breathtaking. A decade ago in America, gay marriage, marriage equality, was something that was considered so difficult to reach. Look how states and localities changed that dynamic in a decade. Fundamentally, the people spoke, the local leaders spoke, the whole national dynamic changed. It changed from the grassroots up. So my only concern is that we are only beginning to tap our potential. My only critique of all of us is we can go farther. We've found it here in New York. Every time we were told something was impossible, and by the way, in my personal view, if you tell me something's impossible, it just makes me want to do it more. I bet I have a lot of people in the room who feel the same way, that we are not going to accept the notion that we can't raise wages and benefits, or we can't give kids full-day pre-K, or we can't treat our immigrants with respect. We're just not going to accept those notions and those boundaries that were repeated and repeated and repeated so constantly, but really never were particularly real. It was perception over reality. So I think the next frontier is the ability of progressives around this country to build a truly national movement, to take these extraordinary local actions and knit them together more coherently. We in this city are trying to provide some of that leadership. I gathered mayors from around the country in August to take on the issue of income inequality, to talk directly and forcefully about the things localities can do to address that issue. Things that are right now, like raising wages and benefits and making sure more people get paid sick leave. Things that will frame the future, like early childhood education for all. Things that will bring so many of our citizens. That is not a metaphor. By the way, whoever you are with your foot, good catch there. All right, we're back. Things that will offer real economic opportunity in a changing world, like broadband access for all. These issues we put before mayors from around the country, and we said, let's organize together with these concepts. And there was incredible energy in the room, because the mayors across the board feel the income inequality crisis, and I know local legislators feel it so deeply. We feel it. It's not an abstraction to us. And we know it has to be addressed, and we know if it's not addressed, it will hold this nation back profoundly. We know it's as important as any other national security concern. So to have all the mayors together, starting to come up with some ground rules and some common concepts was powerful. This coming weekend, we're gathering mayors from around the country to support our president on immigration reform. And this is necessary. By the way, the president's action is crucial to creating a more just country. We have to support him, and we have to organize to support him. It's great to have a leader who steps up and does the right thing. Let's build a movement around it. Let's create momentum from it for the larger, comprehensive immigration reform we need our Congress to achieve. And by the way, if you ever hear that sentence and react as I sometimes do, well, that won't happen anytime soon with this Congress. It's a natural reaction. Again, we have to remind ourselves, why don't we change the rules of the game from the grassroots up? A lot of things that weren't supposed to be possible, a lot of things that seem politically unreachable, happened because the rules of the game changed because the people demanded it. People in this country understand the need for comprehensive immigration reform. They have eyes to see. Let's take this moment of the president's executive order and use it as a moment to build a deeper national movement. That's what we're going to be starting this weekend with mayors from around the country. So I just want to finish by saying I am so appreciative of the work you do. Again, to many of you, a profound thank you, because a lot of what you did helped us to move this agenda here. The doors of New York City are always open to all of you in terms of sharing our ideas, offering strategies that we hope can work for you as well. This connection, this synergy, will change the future not only of our cities and towns and counties, it will change the future of this country. I don't have any doubt about it. We have that critical mass point. I want to thank Local Progress for seeing it and creating a venue for deepening this work. I'm very, very optimistic about where we can go together. But again, it's about us communicating through our actions, through our words, through everything in our being, that we know the people are on our side, we know the people demand these changes, and we will be their representatives in every sense. We will represent their reality and turn it into action. Thank you so much.